Response video to Fred from the front yard. It's often not too quiet enough out here for this, but we'll see how it goes. It's really a pleasant day, and I'm so far behind, blah, blah, blah. Simple, regular complaints that I shouldn't bother with in the video, correct? Yes, it is correct. But that's being human. Human is being flawed and all that kind of crap. So I'm being flawed at the moment. Yeah, flawed. So anyway, this question of the incompleteness of the utilitarian argument. And his basic point at the end of his video was, it's a video on Blip, so I don't know when it'll be on YouTube. But anyway, is sort of connected to this the kid with the whatever, Icarus will not die or whatever. He's just making this pessimist optimist argument, and like somehow the middle is the rational one. If you can see somebody to the left of you wackier than you and somebody to the right wackier than you, all of a sudden you've got it right. I think that's sort of a pile of crap. I mean, it's a pile of crap unless you defend it with more than that. You can't just say it and say, see, the middle's right. No, that's not right. And to say, Fred is basically saying that our brain can't understand our brain, or we can't get enough distance, or there's something about the very fact of thinking about thinking that's verboten, or something about being a value and making value judgments, or having a value mechanism and making value judgments. I'm really going on and on about that, but I don't know exactly his specific point. But it's this can't thing again, this you can't, and therefore. Some of these can'ts, people, it's just like the quantum thing. We can't see the little particles, so we make up stories about the little particles, and that's bullshit. So yeah, I'll concede the point that we can't see ourselves feel. We don't have we haven't defined yet what the minimum amount of brain you need to have a sensation is, what the exact mechanics of one is. We certainly know that we have a lot of stuff beyond what we need. That you can have an accident and lose a big hunk of your brain, and most of you will survive the experience. Can survive. And the opposite is also true, that you can have one, just the bullet will hit just the right spot and you'll be a fucking idiot. Even though 99% of your brain is just fine, it hit the part that matters and you're fucked. A part that matters. So anyway, to the value judgment, the equation is, we're filling in the blanks. And so one of the first question you ask about something's utility, like a car or something, is what made it? What was the purpose of it? What was the design of it? That's that helps right off the bat. If you have the blueprint or the architect's design or some other thing, well, it's a lot easier to understand what the hell the thing was supposed to do and what it can do and all that stuff, because you understand the mechanism. All right, so we weren't created by a god. I think we can all agree on that, anybody rational. And so the design is suspect. The designer is suspect. So we can't use that to just say, well, it has a plan, it's fulfilling it in some strange way, but it's there, and we'll just have to wait for that to reveal itself, or some other kind of crap. So it doesn't get any free ride. You have to really pick it apart now, because it doesn't have some easily identified purpose, like getting you from here to there. It's just not there. It's not obvious in the design. It's obvious from our perspective as feeling creatures, and that's where the corruption might be, in that, yeah, if you just go by what you feel, well, it feels like something I should be doing. I'm motivated to do it. I have sensations that compel me to do it. So, if I just go by that simple statement, but that's where the design, you're part of that design, you're part of the machine. So you have to be careful not to be fooled by that. Call that a fact. That's a circumstantial fact, but it's not a fact relevant to this equation. So anyway, so looking first, so we got no designer. So then when we look at it, what do we see? We see the consumption, reproduction, cannibalism, addiction things. We see this is a basic soup that it's made out of, the parts, and they're not too good. And so now we can say, okay, well, maybe still you could come up with something really great out of that. Because you do have this desire thing, and you do have this satisfaction thing. Those are valuable things, that sensation of glory and beauty and love and passion. These are really powerful things. So there's something in here. It's not all crap. I mean, there's something about that you just can't automatically discount. Certainly the pain and the puke and all those other little horrors that are out there, well, they're definitely nasty. There's no doubt about that. So there's definitely a price being paid for this shit. And it's kind of hefty sometimes, very often. And we're all doomed to some of that. So that's part of this slot machine. This is part of its functionality. So let's look at life as some sort of machine, or some sort of maze game, or some sort of experiment. It is an experiment. Let's at least concede that's a fair description. It's an experiment being conducted on a planetoid because it had circumstances that were capable, and a little moment happened, where all these little right perfect storm thing happened. Everything came, into the spiral at just the right time. And like a double hurricane or double tornado, or however you want to, earthquake, tornado, hurricane, all at once kind of thing. And we're here, and once it starts, it's it's got its own momentum, just because of its nature. And that's what it does. It consumes and it reproduces, and it consumes and it reproduces, and it'll keep doing that no matter what dish you put it in. You put it in a little dish, it'll fill the little dish. You put it in a bigger dish, it'll fill the bigger dish. You put it on planet Earth, it'll fill the planet Earth. That's what it does. It fills vacuums. It fills spaces. And the only thing that limits it is if the environment's just too intolerable. I mean, apparently life doesn't do too well in a high radiation vacuum. It's got limited powers out there so far. It hasn't done too many good space experiments. But that might just be because there's so little to eat. So maybe if we put some food out there, we shoot some snack crackers out into space, maybe life will find a way. So this utilitarian thing is based on this concept that, you have this quantity of satisfying moments, of fun, of glory, of love, of passions, of all of that crap, and it's happening to all these, and that's the other thing. I really don't think we should have to argue that sentience, complex sentience, elaborate sentience, elaborate emotionally meaningful lives are happening in organisms that don't know Shakespeare, they don't know physics, they don't know chemistry. They're not really brilliant, when it comes to the mathematical type crap, but they're very good at the artsy part of life, the emotion part of life, the passion part of life. They know how to do all that crap. The part that we really value, they do have, and they're living in that. And so their sentience has to be part of this equation, this utilitarian equation. We can't win at their expense. We can't win at their suffering. I mean, we can argue about the magnitude of it, whether your comfort is worth 2 gorillas in pain or 5 gorillas, or however you want to try to rationalize it. But I would argue that it's just not really there. If Einstein has a toothache and Tweedledum has a toothache, it's a toothache, damn it. And it really doesn't. You don't need to be Einstein to suffer. So I think that's just a pile of crap to make distinctions like that. And so anyway, I don't see there's no binary math problem inside our brains in doing this simple adding up of what life is and trying to do the equation. There's nothing stopping it. Our brain understands concepts. Almost everything can't be proven. You can't prove water's wet. I mean, even if you can concede the word wet was used to describe what water is, but it still doesn't do anything more than that. It doesn't say anything. The word wet doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't prove it. It's a descriptor. And these are just premises that you just accept, that's what we call that functionality. And there's certain things that we're going to just call good and bad based on the fact that that's the way they are. And if you're going to say we have to prove that pain is bad or that it's an unpleasant, I mean, every word I use is going to be a word we have created to describe that negativity and the fact of that negativity. And I just can't see wasting time proving that these are the goods and these are the bads. I mean, to not be able to slide most things, 90% of things into one category or the other, I think would be ridiculous. And I don't think we have to do it with any more precision than that. You want to talk about whether, wanting a piece of chocolate cake is, a negative or a positive feeling? Well, I don't see any point in arguing that one. We'll just let that one fade out of the picture. We don't need it. It's not necessary to the math. The real game is talking about the hard suffering and talking about the more spectacular pleasures. The more meaningful ones, or the higher meaning ones. So how we do it how you finish that equation. I mean, how you do establish whether this desire thing, that's the one that's going to be the tricky one, because people aren't going to want to. I shouldn't say it that way. It's more complex. Okay, desire is a complex. That's where things get complex, and that's where you have to do some nuanced thinking to accurately describe what's going on, because it basically is an attraction mechanism. Okay, but what's attraction made out of? Attraction's made out of creating a deprivation or a negative state in one entity, so it almost needs to get back what it has lost. I use that analogy. And I would argue that magnetism in physics might be made out of some similar kind of mechanism, and that what's happening inside our brain in terms of creating this thing called a sensation might be a similar phenomenon to something like magnetism. It's a different qualitative state, but it's a similar in the sense of the picture of here you have this mechanical physical universe, and then you have this phenomenon in it that's just a little bit kind of strange and bizarre. And that's sort of what consciousness is. It's kind of strange and bizarre in that you have this manifestation of arrangement. You arrange some molecules a certain way, and all of a sudden that arrangement becomes spectacularly interesting because it's doing something so bizarre. All right, so I'm not going to finish the equation in this video because that gets into arguing all this stuff, but I'm going to argue that it can be done, and this idea that people can't just fall back on this default and say, well, it's too tricky, and I'm just going to assume everything balances out because that's what everybody's been saying. I mean, the fact that everybody's been saying it for 10,000 years doesn't mean that's the truth. This balance of nature or balance of the environment, or everybody's just presuming that somehow the system is going to take care of us and that knows how much suffering is worth enduring, and it has no such conception. There's no reason to believe that has anything to do with how this thing is built. It doesn't care about those kind of balances, and that's the standard, and that's convention, and so that's only just being cliche. It's just being a slave to convention, to the status quo, to what always has been, and you're not going to question it. You're not going to force it to defend itself and to say, well, why? Well, we've always had slaves. I mean, you can make that argument, and you can say everything's working just fine. There's a nice balance. This is the way things should be, and you should be obliged to defend that if that's what you're going to say. And so people are going to say that it all works out all right and that the balance exists. I think they have to do it with some kind of real evidence, and so maybe we have to try to discern the balance in some more honest way. Maybe ask all the people who are closer to the last day of their life rather than the first day of their life, and start asking them some questions about how they reflect on life, and whether ask them direct questions about if they can right this minute be thrown back in the game in a place like Bangladesh as a 5-year-old, would they want that? And and see if we get honest answers out of people for a change. But anyway, I mean, I still, it's not a matter of asking people's opinions. It's I mean, it does have to be logically argued, and I'm just going to argue that what we're chasing is fixing a deprivation created by nature. That nature is using us, manipulating us, and we're falling right into the trap. We don't really need any of the stuff we think we need. The need is all completely artificial. There is no value in the chocolate cake. There's no value in even the woman or the sex or the this. All these things have no value whatsoever. It's just a matter of perception created in your head, an illusion of value. So desire is just completely fake, where something like a fear of pain and suffering or a recognition of its negative value is so much more real. It's not something contrived. You're appreciating for what it is. The very nature of it has a frightening component, a negative aspect. It's that negative that you're seeing, wherein the desire mechanism isn't seeing the positive. It's just compelled by the desire, by the addiction, by the sense of I must have this or I'm not going to feel right, I'm not going to feel good, I'm not going to be happy, and I'm not going to be comfortable unless I can secure this thing. But it isn't anything to do with thinking or understanding. It's completely to do with some sort of physiological functionality. Alright, anyway, not my best video again. So, a couple of misses here in a row, but whatever. But yeah, the idea that our brain is binary and all that stuff anyway is bullshit anyway. I don't think that's how our brain works. It's all if-do programming, yeah, so it's like a computer, but it's like the more complex computer languages. It's not the binary code the computer's running on. It's more like the abstract languages that we use to interpret programming into the computer. And so our brain is working on that interpretive scale. So it has all the if-do switches. I mean, they're not binary switches. I think they're more if-do switches. They're if neuron A is connected, do. If neuron A isn't connected, you're not going to do. Anyway, I don't want to get into that argument, but I'm just saying there's no electrical reason why our brain can't abstractly conceptualize anything. And that's just the way it is. I mean, we can make up something. Our brain can logically deal with most questions. I mean, the tough ones are, what's out there. I mean, how many bazillion miles do you have to go before you find the next island? How big's the universe ocean? What's the affinity thing? That's always going to be a tough one. Not always, but certainly a tough one now for us to put our brain around. Because there's just absolutely no reference in any part of the world we've examined. There's just absolutely nothing that has that capacity to be something that doesn't have an end, or that doesn't have to obey time, or doesn't have, that isn't a running man, that isn't moving with the universe, that operates or functions outside of it. And so those boundaries, conceiving some of those things, or those questions are tough. But I think the question of understanding what we are as an experiment on planet Earth, how useful we are as fungus, is a different question.